This is the story of a group of friends.
I took it to my friend Kevin at like 2 a.m. I called him up at home. He's like, I said, God, we got to make a game console.
Of course, Seamus walks in with this whole plan. Boom, here's the Xbox plan. So it was like, great.
Boy, I remember thinking, what have we gotten ourselves into?
Who took on the leader in a billion-dollar industry.
So we're sitting in a room with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, and Steve Ballmer is saying, wow, we better get this right, otherwise it could potentially really screw up the industry. Xbox was the sexiest thing any Microsoft employee had ever heard of ever at the company. They all wanted to work on it.
This is it. We're not looking back.
I'm waiting for my Xbox.
This is the remarkable story of the Xbox.
Take me to the top.
The Xbox begins with the driving force behind it, Seamus Blackley. Seamus grows up in New Mexico and early on develops an interest in the world of gaming.
I can remember very distinctly the feeling of playing my Atari 2600 and not really wanting to finish the games or to play them so much, but really wanting to take that excitement that I felt and like write my own games. And when I got my Apple, my mom likes to tell a story. When they gave me the Apple II for Christmas, I stayed up for 72 hours straight. The moment they gave it to me, it was plugged into the TV, and I actually fell asleep like on it the first night because I was so desperate to write a game.
Despite his love for games, his career steers him into another direction.
I was working as a physicist, and I was doing high-energy physics. And there was this giant particle accelerator that was going to be built in Texas called the Superconducting Super Collider in Waxahachie, Texas. And that was my future, and everybody else's future who was doing experimental high-energy physics in the U.S. at that time. That was what it was about, for the most part. And it got canceled. It got canceled by Congress.
With no job on the horizon, Seamus applies for a job posting on campus.
It was Looking Glass Technologies. They needed somebody to rewrite a car physics model for a car and driver game they were working on. And so I went over there and met all the guys working on Ultima Underworld and met Ned Lerner, who was an idol of mine from Chuck Yeager's Flight Simulator in days past. And started working on car physics, and that grew into the physics system in System Shock and AI stuff and Flight Unlimited and Underworld 2 and all that stuff.
But new management flies into a completely different direction.
So, these game guys, we're going to bring in a professional management team. And at the time I was saying, look, we need to do combat version of Flight Unlimited. I really want to do that. And the management decided that instead they wanted to compete with Microsoft Flight Simulator. So I started looking for a job, and I eventually got recruited to go work at DreamWorks.
At DreamWorks, Seamus goes to work on a game based on the smash hit movie Jurassic Park by Steven Spielberg. The future looks bright for Seamus, but there are storm clouds on the horizon.
So there I did a bunch of stuff, culminating in working on Trespasser.
Backhunter, quite vicious and quite intelligent.
Screwed that up pretty well, and didn't do a lot of things that I know I would I'd want to do today.
I can do this.
Trespasser is released in 1998, and its flaws are obvious. Critics and fans are disappointed, and Seamus loses faith in himself.
8 left.
After Trespasser, I got death threats.
Heavier than I thought.
There was a huge backlash. It was the very dawn of fan sites on the internet. It was the dawn of the sort of culture of first-person shooters, and everybody expected to be a shooter.
7, 6.
I mean, first of all, they expected it to be finished, which it wasn't. But they expected it to be a shooter, and it wasn't. It was really different. So people were really pissed off. I mean, people really hated that game. I mean, there were some people who really loved it, and there were a lot of people who just hated it, and I figured that my career was over. It really did. It was an incredibly painful time.
And a turning point. Seamus decides to make a change and heads north.
And I thought I'd just go hide at Microsoft for a while. I chose a program manager job in the graphics division because I just wanted to get away from games.
But he's not able to resist games for long. In 1999, Sony announces the release of their newest console, the PlayStation 2, and enterprising Seamus has an idea.
Well, there were rumors of Sony, releasing this new version of the PlayStation. That it was going to kill PC graphics outright. And, I've been doing 3D for a long time, and 3D on the PC is unstoppable. I mean, it's just continuously innovating, continuously feeding back on itself, continuously progressing. And it just seemed ludicrous to me. It became clear to me that, very few companies in the world could do something as bold as take on Sony, and Microsoft was one of them. That it became incredibly clear to the other guys that I talked to about it that we had an opportunity to make a game console which had the business potential of a game console, but had the tool support and the power for artists of the PC and of the sort of traditional offline rendering community. And that was really the spark.
And at 35,000 feet in the air, Seamus is inspired.
So, one night, for whatever reason, I was sitting on an airplane and I got hit by cosmic radiation. And I wrote this thing up, and I took it to my friend Kevin at like 2 a.m. after I landed. I called him up at home. He's like, I said, we got to make a game console.
Kevin Bacchus, a project manager at DirectX, sees the potential.
Initially, there were really 4 of us working on Xbox. Seamus, myself, Otto Burkus, who ran the graphics development for DirectX, and Ted Hasse, who was my boss, who was in charge of evangelism for DirectX. We obviously went and talked to Ed Fries extensively about what his thoughts would be.
Ed Fries, the man in charge of the games division at Microsoft, is immediately impressed.
They approached me and said, hey, if we made this console, would you support us? Would you help us get it through upper management? And would you help make the games for us? They were pretty persuasive. They had a plan that I thought was pretty exciting.
The group embarks on a crusade to bring the console to the masses.
We had day jobs. We had stuff we were supposed to be doing, right? And we just weren't doing it, right? We were inviting ourselves to meetings. And we thought, God, if they're making a device for the home, it has to be Xbox. It has to be this thing we're thinking of, which at the time we were calling the Direct Xbox, which is how it got the name Xbox.
The group pushes the idea up through the ranks at Microsoft, eventually reaching the top. Mr. Bill Gates.
The first time that we talked to Bill Gates about Xbox, I think he was immediately very taken by the opportunity, by the chance to create something that was technologically superior to anything that was out there, and really focused on a single task.
Bill got it right away. I mean, Bill's a very sharp guy.
So he became one of our biggest allies from the beginning.
It was just awesome. It was the most awesome sort of, support ever. And they just kept on pushing it.
Bill Gates sends a memo endorsing the Xbox project. For Seamus, Kevin, and Ed, the moment of truth finally arrives.
Wow, we better get this right, otherwise it could potentially really screw up the industry.
By 1999, the Xbox is a legitimate project. Software giant Microsoft assembles a team to oversee key elements of the Xbox production.
Jay Allard came on board to run the development efforts to create the operating system for the device, all the development tools, that sort of thing. And he brought on board a number of people in key positions to kind of round out that group.
It was still just an internal project at Microsoft that wasn't something that had been officially announced. It was still very much under wraps because they themselves weren't sure they were going to do it. But the very fact that Microsoft was considering coming into the games console market was a big deal.
It could potentially be a bad thing if Microsoft decides they're going to launch like basically a home PC, branded a game console and put a bunch of PC games on it or something like that, which to those guys who are very smart guys at Microsoft but don't have a lot of context in the game business could well have happened. And so we felt a lot of responsibility to be sure that wouldn't happen.
And the response from the gaming community is encouraging.
When we went out to publishers and developers is that we've been kind of secretly meeting with all these guys for months and months and months, refining the idea. What do you guys think about this? Oh, that's a crazy idea. What do you think about that? Oh, that's great.
As push comes to shove, Gates makes a historical decision.
It was a meeting where Valentine's Day was a month before GDC, and it was a point at which we're going to announce it at GDC or we're going to cancel this project because we're not going to be ready in time.
It was just the final time. It's like, look, you have to say go or no go now.
Starting up a console and spending billions of dollars to enter a new market is a difficult undertaking for any company, even a company the size of Microsoft.
So we come into this meeting. It's scheduled to run from 4 to 6 o'clock on Valentine's Day. And Bill is just like immediately on the attack. But what do you mean it won't run Windows? Oh, did we forget to tell you that part?
And you find yourself sitting in a room with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, and Steve Ballmer is right here, like, you know, the sweat's in his forehead saying, you know, you're going to lose all our money!
We all have dinner reservations, and we're in big trouble because it's Valentine's Day and we're not home and the time is going by. And then in the last 5 minutes, the meeting just, like, turned around, like 180 degrees. And, you know, I don't know if Bill and Steve had this planned the whole time. And all of a sudden, they're all looking around at each other. We got to do this. We got to do this. And then they're all getting excited, which is fun to be part of.
In March of 2000, Bill Gates stands on stage at the Game Developers Conference and announces what many had already suspected.
I'm announcing the Xbox. The modest tagline here is the future of console gaming. This is a huge milestone for us.
All they have to do now is accomplish everything they said they could.
Boy, I remember thinking, what have we gotten ourselves into? You know, once the product was finally approved and there were absolutely no other reviews or approvals processes, once Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer said, look, you know, this is it, we're not looking back, then the really hard work came in. Every assumption that we had, every plan had to be tested. And it was challenging.
You have this giant company behind you, Microsoft behind you, right? You get Microsoft, like, going in a direction, you better be sure it's the right direction, right? So we started feeling like, wow, we better get this right, otherwise it could potentially really screw up the industry.
There was a lot of skepticism about, you know, were we really serious about doing this? Was there ever even going to be a console? There was skepticism about whether we would be able to hit our launch date, whether the performance would be what we said it would be, whether it would in fact be easy to program. At every step along the way, there was a constant proving process. We had to show games very early because, you know, we needed to demonstrate what the game was going to be. We had to show that it wasn't a PC.
You know, we built the system for developers. There is nobody out there who wouldn't tell you the NVIDIA chip was the hottest thing in the world. Nobody.
All consoles are essentially computers. There's a processor, there's a graphics chip, there's an audio chip. All the things that you see in a PC are evident in a console, but they're very different. They're very focused on a very specific thing, on gaming.
And sometimes it's not what's on the inside, but the outside that counts. In January 2001, the public gets its first look at the controller and industrial design of the Xbox.
Of course, we didn't want the Xbox to look uncool. We wanted it to look powerful. We did a lot of design studies.
One of the things that Enthusiast pressed was the controller. Some people didn't mind the fact that the original controller, which they called Duke, was bigger. But I think to a lot of the gamers, they just kind of felt that it was just a little too big. And they've subsequently gone with the S-type controller, which they developed for Japan, which was definitely a better.
As the launch date approaches, Microsoft's marketing machine shifts into high gear.
Microsoft faced this huge dilemma with how they were going to position themselves in the market. Do we brand it Xbox, but do we have Microsoft on the box? Do we use Bill Gates? Is Bill Gates liked by gamers? Isn't he? So I think they had a huge consumer marketing identity crisis that they sort of needed to address right away.
Anticipation builds on November 12, 2001 in Times Square.
I remember walking across the street from the WWF place over to the Toys R Us to get ready for the midnight thing. Bill was there and a couple other people, and Xbox is just everywhere. Up on the lights, every billboard in Times Square, all the big electronic signs, and there's Xbox here, Xbox there, and it was just, I don't know, it's one of those kind of surreal moments.
At 12:01 a.m., Bill Gates presents the first Xbox to a customer who had been waiting for hours outside.
Yeah, it's just one of those moments in your life that you're just glad to be part of.
But Seamus has other things to worry about.
Well, I was super nervous because I was going to propose to my wife that night. That was the thing I was really nervous about. And I had arranged for Bill Gates to hold my engagement ring, right? So he had my engagement ring in pocket. And Bill had called me that afternoon and said, what if she says no? Do you have a backup plan in case she says no? And so I'm thinking, God, is she going to say no? Because I had no doubts up until that moment. I was like, oh no, she'll probably say yes. It'll all be okay. Frankly, compared to that, the launch of the Xbox is almost anticlimactic. You know, for me, the launch was all about getting on my knee and, you know, having the most fabulous woman on earth say she'd marry me.
Look at the graphic. Look at this mode. Look, I'm on fire.
With a successful console launch and an engagement, Blackley has achieved everything he has hoped for. But the fate of the Xbox is far from certain.
This is an Xbox! It's #1!
Success. With the Xbox successfully launched in time for Christmas 2001, the future of the system now lies in the hands of the developers.
Well, I think that the #1 thing that we wanted to achieve was for people who got an Xbox to just be blown away. That has to be the ultimate goal, right? You know, we talked to the people in line in New York, and they were really excited about Xbox.
The first Christmas, all the hardcore gamers are going to go out and they're going to buy it because they got it. It's new. It's exciting. There's a lot of press about it. They got to see if it really lives up to the hype.
But you don't want to take it home and like open it up and have it. And that actually happened with a couple of other console launches, right? People got excited with the technology. You take it home, and of course, technology isn't enough, right? It goes on and makes the boot noise, and then you put in a game that's not so great, and you're like, whoa, they went $300.
Oh, that was awesome.
They have to feel incredibly happy about it.
The thing sold out everywhere, and it was just, you know, a giant success. The real question on any console is how it does in subsequent years, you know, especially the second Christmas.
That's really important. That's when, to some extent, the real battle happens. Because everybody has a lot of units out there, a lot of consoles, you know, and the generation of games that come out into that installed base appear.
So what happens in the later years is really kind of dependent on the quality of the games. That is something that's, you know, just a very magical and very difficult thing to predict in advance.
And then it's a real creative contest, right? Then it's not about the specs of the hardware. It's not about how cool your TV campaign is. You know, it's not about any of those things. It's about which games you have and are your fans happy or not. So I would argue the real worker is then.
If you got a great game and it's only available on Xbox and it's the thing that everybody's excited about, then they're going to go out and buy Xboxes.
Microsoft's development team, Bungie, provides the must-have game for the season.
Halo was awesome.
We're not gonna make it.
We'll make it.
Pull up! Pull up!
Played a lot of games in my life, and this is a game I could just sit and play and have a great time. So I really felt pretty confident that we were going to be able to come out and really surprise people.
Despite fierce competition, Microsoft manages to sell 1.5 million consoles and nearly 5 million Xbox games by Christmas. Developers take advantage of the console's hardware abilities to create distinct and innovative games.
Camera! No. That means turn on the lights, idiot!
I'd have to say that right now my favorite game is a game from Microsoft Studios that just came out called
Kung Fu Chaos!
It's a fighting game, but it's kind of a party game. And to see that kind of work and craftsmanship going to a game produced for something that kind of we had an idea about, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it's just astounding.
In the fall of 2002, Xbox Live is launched.
We've been cooking this thing up from the get-go. 3 years ago when we conceived of Xbox, we wanted to bring it online. Online gaming is going to be the big next step in video gaming.
And a celebrity event is held.
These are always really fun parties.
Bring it on! Yeah, I'm excited.
It's so exciting and it really improves the hand-eye coordination.
It's awesome, man. It's awesome.
Super fun. Great games.
Realistic. I think that's off the chain.
Yeah, I love this stuff.
Gift bag.
my mind, I connect the dots thinking about Xbox.
Even as the Xbox continues to succeed, preparations are made for a new system.
Go for it!
We're deep in planning right now for the next version of Xbox.
Is this guy serious?
I actually probably spend more time right now when I'm in the office. I probably spend more time right now on Xbox 2 than I spend on Xbox 1, if you can believe that.
Whatever.
And part of that is because we got to do it right this time.
Right.
We want to have enough time to make sure that we're not like just insane at the end. And that we have the content portfolio really planned out, and we have the games lined up, and that we have this machine that's not only going to be successful in the US but can be successful everywhere in the world, and that's what's going on.
Although Kevin and Seamus have left to start their own development company, just taking a look back is sometimes the greatest reward.
It was a mixture because on the one hand, it was really, really hard. But on the other hand, I mean, it was probably the best time I've ever had in my life because we were out doing what we wanted to do. I mean, you know, very few times do you get the opportunity to actually see kind of your, you know, a dream that you had come together, and so many people come together to make it happen.
Like looking back to, 1999, it's just unbelievable. I went to Tokyo Game Show and there were giant Xbox banners everywhere, right? It's unbelievable. And you think back to 1999, think back to me and Kevin and Otto and Ted, these four guys like sitting in a room eating jelly beans, come on. That's a wild ride. That's a really amazing thing. So I guess for me personally, there's that. I can't really hold it to an absolute scale because it's really emotional. So it's just, it's nearly unbelievable.
Xbox is the next generation of video gaming.
It's the only controller I've ever touched that actually molds to your hand.
Dead or alive, dead or alive.
Yeah, that looks pretty cool.
No, I let him play all the time. It keeps him home.
It's awesome. It's the best console ever, man.
It's 80 times more powerful than its predecessor.
I wanted to get a lot more CPU and graphics horsepower.
It's designed to take gaming to the next level.
We've got Dolby 5.1, we've got high def. Everything's ready to go for you.
We weren't driving toward a spec. We weren't driving toward a marketing campaign. We were driving for how do we make real games as good as they possibly can be.
And it's poised to become the new king of interactive entertainment.
And we're going after people. People on Earth is our market. Our strategy is to provide a great platform for game creators to do their best work. It's that simple.
It's the Xbox 360, and this is its story. In 2001, the console wars are raging. The software giant Microsoft finds itself playing a role that it's not accustomed to, the underdog.
On Xbox One, our goals were pretty simple. It was beat Sony's performance and get to market faster than anyone's ever developed a game console.
We were new to the market, brand new product in an established environment. Sony already had a huge installed base by the time we hit the streets. They'd been out about 18 months before we launched.
The challenge on Xbox One was all about time to market and maximize performance. We knew what Sony's architecture was, we knew we had to trump that architecture, and we knew we had to develop it in 18 months, faster than anybody had ever developed a game console.
Well, this is a very big night. It's a night that we've been waiting for over 18 months.
The launch itself was really successful. When we did launch, we sold out every one we had. We had a pretty good launch lineup, and we just kept building momentum. Xbox Live launched a year later. We pushed that around the world in the year.
Look at this mode. Look, I'm on fire.
So we were very, very happy with the launch of Xbox.
By August 2005, 13 million Xbox consoles are sold in the U.S. a strong showing for a newcomer. But it's short of Sony's established base of 30 million PlayStation 2s. While the original Xbox is anything but a failure, Microsoft has already set its sights on the next round.
The Xbox 360 program started back in 2002.
The code name for the product was Xenon.
The lessons learned from the first Xbox prove invaluable.
When we think about Xbox, it was really kind of learning the business. Microsoft had never done a game console before, hadn't really done a hardware business at this scale before. So there was a lot to learn, just about how to run a business, how to sustain the business.
So they wanted to get a foothold in the market. They wanted to figure out what worked.
As we got into the market, we realized there was a lot more to the business that we didn't understand. Actually building a successful business on the financial side and building a bigger ecosystem where more of our partners could make profit.
One of the big lessons we learned from Xbox was being more of a worldwide company. Xbox was kind of a US-centric product. I mean, it's a bunch of Microsoft guys, team members that got together and built a product. One of the things we learned was, hey, we didn't build a box that was as universally appealing as we'd have liked. So in Japan, it was a little intimidating. It was black, it was big, and it wasn't something that they necessarily wanted to have in their home. In Europe, again, the black box wasn't as universally as interesting.
At that time, we didn't know exactly what our architecture was going to be. We didn't know when Sony was going to launch. We didn't know what Nintendo's position in the market was going to be. So rather than picking a final architecture early on, we built a flexible architecture with some high-level goals and premises around how should we make architectural trade-offs.
We got all together and said, how can we build the best overall product? And we went through a process of time where we actually sat down and developed a plan, basically a 30-page document that said, here's what we'd like to build. And we did that in the context of a worldwide product. How do we address the Japanese market? How do we address the European market? How do we address the US market? How do we look at other regions around the world? How do we attract a broader audience? How do we make it great for the hardcore gamer?
As the Xenon team puts together a game plan for the Xbox 360, Microsoft starts looking for the next generation technology that will power it. Armed with the lessons learned with the first Xbox, Microsoft begins to piece together their next console bit by bit.
We didn't want to be second to market again. So what that meant to us was that we felt we had to be ready in 2005.
It's important for Microsoft to come out first because if they want to beat Sony, who's the market leader 2 generations in a row, they need every single tool they can use, including the early launch, to get ahead of Sony.
Started working on a 360 plan, putting together the early details, working on what we thought the hardware plan was going to be.
It's a really interesting process because you're always balancing this ultimate design that you want to have against technological constraints, schedules constraints. All these things can affect what you can do from a design standpoint. So you look at things and say, well, this is the ultimate experience, and then we go over to the hardware team, they say, oh my goodness, if you do that, that adds 2 cents. We're like, 2 cents? Oh, well, 2 cents times X million is a lot of money.
Well, there's some basic features, if you will, that we want in all of the 360 games. High definition games is one of them, for example. Games that look great in 16:9 high definition, games that have full surround 5.1 audio.
Well, the HD era, we're really on this turning point for the industry. From the 2D to 3D generation of gaming, all sorts of things changed. A lot of rules changed, a lot of the players changed, and obviously the experience that the gamer received changed as well. We're now on the next shift, which is really from 3D to high def.
The real key to the system itself is making sure we have a system that's powerful developers to really get to what we call the HD era. We made a decision a while back to really invest in the system memory, and so as a result, developers now have 512 megs of system memory to deal with. Enough memory for them to really deliver a true next generational and high definition experience.
Wanted to get a lot more CPU and graphics horsepower. It quickly became clear that to get the level of performance that we needed, NVIDIA and ATI were the 2 front runners. The big advantage that ATI gave for us is they shared our vision of the HD era. ATI shared that vision of how can we maximize the real performance for real games. We weren't driving toward a spec. We weren't driving toward a marketing campaign. We were driving for how do we make real games as good as they possibly can be.
And then once you're ready to go for HD, we're ready there for you because we've got Dolby 5.1, we've got high def, everything's ready to go for you.
At the heart of the Xbox 360 are 3 IBM CPUs that, when combined, are 80 times more powerful than the original Xbox.
We picked IBM over a bunch of different suppliers mainly because of the efficiency of their architecture. By efficiency, I mean trying to cram as much CPU horsepower into a very small package, a very small console. Those were key elements in picking IBM.
They were willing to work with us in terms of giving us control of our own destiny, in terms of silicon manufacturing, we can control that. So you want to find a partner who's willing to work with you in that respect. So long-term roadmap, partnership, lots of business issues again, but ultimately it was the right partnership for us.
Microsoft wants developers to harness all this newfound power as easily as possible.
A real asset that we built in Xbox was our partnership with both developers and publishers, something we focused on very early and something historically Microsoft has actually done pretty well.
Microsoft's also done a really good job of supporting third-party developers. Ubisoft, THQ, EA, and Activision, and they all have said Microsoft's been really helpful.
Also, efforts are redoubled to capture the interest of Japanese game companies.
Japanese game developers has been a tough group for us because we haven't been as successful in Japan. But I think we're doing some really smart things now. We're forging some great partnerships with some of the best historical Japanese developers.
Sakaguchi-san, as the creator of Final Fantasy, is going to be doing 2 individual proprietary pieces of intellectual property that will be exclusive for Xbox 360. Mizuguchi-san is one of my favorite developers. We all love things like Space Channel 5 and Rez. And of course, Okamoto-san, most famous for his work on Resident Evil.
They've done a good job of getting Japanese developers on board.
And through it all, Bill Gates himself keeps tabs on the progress.
On Xbox One, I met Bill 2 times in 2 different meetings during the course of a 4-year program. On Xbox 360, for the first year of the development, we were in the boardroom almost once a month. He was so excited about the product that he just wanted to get involved and wanted to be down here on the Millennium campus helping us.
While Microsoft works on the insides of the new Xbox, it focuses an equal amount of attention on the outside.
We thought maybe this could have a hamburger in it, but so we didn't really think that it worked that well.
Xbox 360 is shaping up to be a gaming powerhouse, and Microsoft wants to make sure that its new system's appearance reflects its amazing abilities.
We started with this guy, which was a really wonderful box. It worked really well, but let's just say it needed a little more love in terms of design aesthetic. So we thought, well, where can we go with this?
If we think about Japan and some of the issues we've had in Japan as regards the inability of us really to get going, quite frankly, one of the core issues has been the design of the current Xbox.
That system was gigantic. It was heavy, and it didn't appeal to anybody but Americans and a few Europeans. It was way too big for the Japanese market, and Microsoft tanked in Asia. Tanked. I mean, they didn't sell badly, they sold horribly.
So the criteria I laid out for the brand team at that time was, we have got to be able to satisfy the Japanese gamer. We actually looked at 5 different design companies from around the world. It narrowed down to 2 companies.
One was Astro in San Francisco, and another one is HERS in Osaka. Got to a point where designs were going back and forth between HERS and Astro. And so they started playing with what's the button going to look like? What happens when you actually have enough ports for gameplay and all those kind of things? And so it started really drawing in.
The design of the box and the form factor that we ultimately landed on is always a trade-off between mechanical constraints, being thermal and physical constraints, versus industrial design. It's very similar to an architect and a civil engineer building a skyscraper. The best looking design may not be able to be built. The most robust design may be very straightforward, ugly, not the type of thing you'd want to actually build.
What we wanted was this breathe-in quality, where it breathes in. You get this sense of power as though you're in the blocks and starting a race, or the analogy was Bruce Lee pulling back to do a punch.
On one end of the spectrum, if you make the box too small, you end up with a box that is too hot, too loud, with the fans having to churn a lot of air through that box to cool it off, too high of a cost in miniaturization cost. The other end of the spectrum, if you build only a mechanical design solution, you end up with a very large, ugly box. It may be quiet, but it's not aesthetically pleasing.
We did user studies. We went through around the world, Germany, France, England, United States, parts of Asia, talked to different designers, talked to different gamers and said, you know, what are you interested in? And it started taking shape. We kind of had some interesting changes here. This one came from Japan, and it had a very nice pillowy feature to it and had the handle. Again, it was not a practical box. Really, what we were trying to do is see what people responded to. It really ran the gamut. I mean, you got this kind of guy, which has some nice features on it in terms of the chrome and all that, but it's still pretty boxy and might look like someone else you might know. This came from a very high-end designer. We thought maybe it could have a hamburger in it, but so we didn't really think that it worked that well. Oop, look at that. There was some sleek designs too that brought in things like glass textures, and these are really explorations.
So what you will see is somewhat concave. It has what we call the iconic gesture. That gesture is iconic enough that makes it distinctive, but not so bold and brash that will make it look, if you will, out of fashion after a couple of years.
And what we ended up with was this design. And you can see there's a lot of what was here has been incorporated into the final design. You get the gesture, you get the breathe in, you get a design aesthetic that is more appealing to a wider audience. You get some of the chrome and some of the finer lines, the organic lines, but there's still an architectural quality about it, and a simple quality that allows you to really get a sense that this is a high-quality machine. You can see the difference between the two.
A few finishing touches round out the final package.
You'll be able to take the faceplate off and snap on a faceplate either absolutely personalized to what you want to do.
This is our favorite feature too, is that we have the ring of light. It's the thing that tells you how many controllers are actually attached to the system. And you see that this is in the upper left position. Okay, you ready for this big move? All right, ready, here we go. So it's in position 1 now. Oh, look at that, woo!
An equal amount of care is given to the design of the Xbox 360 controller.
So the areas where we put lots and lots of energy into this is the gamepad itself. People are going to be holding this for hours on end, playing games, playing different types of games that use the control sets in different ways.
We did tons and tons of user testing, and we went through all kinds of iterations, some of them even laughable, like this one. And what we did is we actually tried different sizes and shapes. So you kind of go, oh, how's that feel? We need to pass this around a whole basket full of these and go, how's that feel in your hand? Oh, I don't know, that feels pretty good. And then you hand it to somebody else and they go, no, that doesn't feel good.
One of the key elements to making the console as unique as it is the decision to go wireless on the gamepads.
The Xbox 360 controller is not a revolutionary controller. It's an evolutionary controller. Microsoft took the basic shape of the S controller from the Xbox and refined it and polished it and crafted it to a much more ergonomically fit controller. It's lighter, it's very sturdy, it feels good in your hands.
But no matter how well designed a controller is, no matter how slick a console looks, it all comes down to the games, and Microsoft knows it. Microsoft knows that having a solid launch lineup can play a big role in the success of the Xbox 360. And that's why it's pulling out the big guns.
The world's best game creators are building experiences on our console that satisfy gamers and actually reflect the change that our industry and that the consumers are facing right now.
There's no super stinkers out there. You've got 4 games from Activision, all pretty hefty games. They're all franchise games except for Gun. You've got a bunch of EA games, all franchise games. Madden, Tiger Woods, FIFA, all that. They really show off the Xbox 360's power.
Well, I think the key is going to be the games. And when we look at what we have on slate for the launch window, finally, Rare in the UK will come to bear on this platform. Perfect Dark Zero will be in the launch window. The GoldenEye team have been working on Perfect Dark Zero now for close to 3 years.
The other thing about the launch is that Microsoft's 3 games, Cameo, Elements of Power, Perfect Dark Zero, and Project Gotham Racing 3, are all some of the best games on the system in terms of both playability and graphics.
Gamers get a glimpse of the new system and its games at E3 and X05.
At E3, we showed some games. They were okay, but it was early development, early hardware. X05 was really our coming out party. We wanted to show people what great games we're going to have on the platform at launch.
When we came to X05, we were relieved, happy, satisfied that these games actually were going to come through. This was going to be a good launch after all.
Turning on the Xbox 360 reveals plenty of new features, including a major upgrade to Xbox Live.
So, to start off the experience, we've got this new great button. It's the Xbox Guide button. It not only helps you get through your overall experience on the gaming system, but it also allows you to turn on the system. There are 4 blades. There's a Live blade, games, media, and system. If you're hooked up to Live, the blade that'll default is the Live blade, and it gives you all the access to your message center, to your friends, and also to Marketplace. And Marketplace is a place where you'll be able to download new gamer pictures, new tracks, different themes that go with your faceplates, or just themes in general. On the Games blade, you have the ability to look at your achievements, how many games you played. The Media blade gives you access to all of your digital entertainment. You have access to music, so you can hook in an iRiver. Also, you can plug in a camera, set up a slideshow, play music over it.
In Xbox Live now, we create what we call gamer zones. In gamer zones, you can kind of place yourself where you want to be on the spectrum of gamers. So if you're just kind of a recreational gamer, we have a gamer zone called Recreation. But if you're a really hardcore gamer and you really like to play hard and you want to win that world championship, we have Pro.
When the Xbox 360 launches on November 22nd, 2005, Microsoft tries a new approach to pricing.
So there are 2 versions of the Xbox 360 product. The first version is the Xbox 360 Core system, which is a low-cost value system that allows people to get into the product, plays every game, loses no long-term features. You can upgrade to the Core system to the full 360 system at any time through aftermarket accessories. The Xbox 360 system, on the other hand, was optimized to have everything you need out of the box for a great gaming experience. It's optimized for high definition, for the hard drive, for Xbox Live, with all the cables and connections you need, wireless connectivity with wireless gamepads. So that's the system where the highest value is packed into that system for the gamer that wants the ultimate next-generation experience.
For the first time ever, a console will ship in all 3 major markets of the world in the same holiday. So you will see North America, quickly followed by Europe, and then followed by Japan.
As the Xbox 360 takes its first steps into the world, Microsoft is already preparing for the future.
The 360's primary upgrade path is the software architecture that we've designed. It's designed to be scalable and upgradable. On the hardware space, because we designed a console that had a flexible architecture, for example, the PCI Express bus exists on the motherboard. So doing a derivative motherboard and a derivative product where we wanted to add features would be very easy for us to do.
That's the interesting thing about this business is the finish line is the beginning in many, many ways. Once it gets out there, people are going to take control of it, and the community will start driving it, and they'll grow it and build it, and they'll turn it into something that none of us expected.
Yeah, we're going after people. People on Earth is our market. Our strategy is to provide a great platform for game creators to do their best work. It's that simple.
Obviously, they want to do well with the system. They want to hammer Sony in all of its sell points. They want to kick their ass in online. They want to kick their ass in the interface. They want to have a bunch of great games. They want to get out there a year ahead of them and really, really take it to Sony. They want to be first. They want to be the #1 console maker in the market.
I'm really excited about seeing the launch. It's been over 3 years focusing on this product, and to look back at early slide decks, PowerPoint vision of what the product could be 3 years ago to what we actually are delivering now, we got to 99% of that original vision, which is amazing to me.